Okay, if you've glanced at global news anytime recently, you've probably been completely bombarded with the exact same terrifying headline. An imminent, explosive conflict over Taiwan is right around the corner. I mean, every single military drill, every grainy satellite photo, every speech out of Beijing, it's all intensely dissected for proof that they're about to make a massive move. But honestly, what if conventional wisdom is just entirely missing the big picture? Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to look right past those dramatic headlines. We're going to dive into why Beijing's actual strategy isn't some sudden D-Day style invasion at all, but rather a slow, deeply calculated psychological campaign. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why military pressure is actually designed to become, well, completely routine.
So let's jump back to 2021. This one single assessment from Admiral Philip Davidson essentially created an unofficial global countdown to war. When he floated 2027 as the timeline, it literally sent shockwaves through the international community. Almost overnight, 2027 became this universally accepted deadline. It framed the entire geopolitical conversation around a ticking clock. But when we actually step back and look at the hard intelligence and the observable data on the ground right now, that assumption starts to look incredibly shaky. If a full-blown invasion were genuinely scheduled for the next couple of years, the reality in mainland China would look vastly different than it does today.
Think about it like this. Yes, China is modernizing its military at a historic pace. They're expanding their industrial base, launching advanced naval ships, building up incredible missile capabilities. But here's the absolute crucial difference. Modernization is not mobilization. To pull off something as insanely complicated as a cross-strait invasion, we wouldn't just see new ships, we'd see massive, undeniable shifts across their entire society. We're talking the wholesale conversion of civilian factories for wartime production, nationwide readiness drills, a logistical build-up so huge you couldn't possibly hide it. And guess what? None of those signals are flashing red right now. Not one.
Well, if a full-scale attack isn't happening tomorrow, it raises a really fascinating question. What exactly is Beijing's true long-term game plan? Look, the Chinese Communist Party absolutely views reunification as a historic mission. It's totally central to what their leadership calls the Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. It's basically treated as their version of Manifest Destiny. But, and this is a massive but, Beijing doesn't just want Taiwan. They want Taiwan without paying the completely catastrophic cost of taking it by sheer force. That one little distinction changes absolutely everything about their playbook. They aren't racing against a clock. They're playing a completely different game.
And that brings us to the core focus of our explainer today. The answer lies in a really brilliant, if unsettling, concept called strategic conditioning. This perfectly explains why military pressure is deliberately designed to become routine. We usually think of military exercises as just practice for a war, right? But in this context, the exercises literally are the weapon. It's a strategy rooted just as much in psychology as it is in physical force. By just gradually, almost imperceptibly turning up the heat, Beijing aims to completely alter the strategic environment without ever crossing a massive red line that would trigger World War III. They are redefining what normal means, day by day.
Let's look at how this conditioning actually plays out in the real world. Think back to the very first time fighter jets crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait. It was breaking global news. People thought it was a severe escalation. But the 10th time? The 50th time? Now it barely even makes the back pages. The political shockwave of that pressure just fades away. And that is exactly why this military pressure becomes routine. Once this elevated, aggressive activity is just shrugged off as the new normal, Beijing has successfully shifted the baseline of the entire conflict in their favor, and they did it without firing a single bullet.
They are being intentionally patient because, honestly, the alternative is a nightmare. An actual invasion means paying an enormous, multifaceted cost. Just geographically speaking, an amphibious assault on Taiwan would be one of the most complex military operations in human history. The western coastline has barely any usable landing beaches, and right behind them, dense cities and insanely rugged mountains. Then there's the economy. A war would trigger sweeping global sanctions that could instantly undo decades of China's economic miracle. And geopolitically, you run the massive risk of a direct clash with the United States. Basically, an invasion could easily destroy China's rise entirely.
So to get what they want without blowing up the world, Beijing operates in this broad, murky gray zone just below open warfare. We tend to think of conflict as a simple on-off switch. It's either total peace or total war. But reality is way more nuanced than that. By using things like relentless cyber operations, diplomatic isolation, airspace controls, and economic restrictions, Beijing can squeeze Taiwan from a dozen different directions all at once.
They can pull these levers individually or yank them all together to create this incredibly suffocating environment, all while cleverly avoiding the backlash of an actual declaration of war.
The core strategy behind all of these coercive tactics is subtle, but it's incredibly profound. They want to slowly turn the screws so that closer engagement with the mainland eventually feels completely, totally unavoidable. It's often called an anaconda strategy, just slowly squeezing from all sides so that resisting integration eventually just feels way too exhausting for Taiwan to maintain. They want to change Taiwan's behavior long before they ever need to alter the actual physical map. By twisting supply chains and constantly flexing their military muscle, they're trying to make permanent separation feel like an impossible, crushing burden.
But here's the catch, and it's a massive obstacle for Beijing. You can't just fire a missile and expect it to make someone feel more culturally aligned with you, right? Sheer military force cannot easily reshape the political identity of a modern generation. Modern Taiwan is a vibrant, incredibly successful democracy. They have their own currency, their own elections, their own independent institutions. An entire generation has grown up knowing nothing else. When you look at public opinion surveys, the vast majority of Taiwanese citizens prefer maintaining this exact status quo. Very few actually want political reunification. That deeply rooted democratic identity is incredibly hard to break with just military posturing.
Because of that stubborn democratic reality, Chinese leaders are exercising immense patience. They're basically operating on the assumption that waiting and growing their own internal strength will just make their ultimate goal easier to achieve later on. Instead of asking, hey, can we take Taiwan today? They're looking at the massive trajectory of their own expanding industrial and technological power. They are banking on the idea that the longer they wait, the stronger their relative position becomes. That is why they view reunification as inevitable, not necessarily urgent. In their minds, time itself is their single most powerful weapon.
Actually, hold on a second. That whole strategy assumes that time is always on their side. But that theory is facing some serious reality checks right now. Things are definitely not perfectly smooth on the mainland. Economic growth has slowed way down compared to the boom years we used to see. They have incredibly deep structural problems weighing down their property sector. And maybe most importantly, they are staring down an unprecedented aging population and a rapidly declining birth rate that totally threatens their future workforce. These factors might not collapse the state overnight, but over the next few decades, they are going to severely strain Beijing's resources and seriously challenge the idea that tomorrow is always better than today.
And beyond those domestic headaches, there's a massive geopolitical hurdle sitting right in the middle of the Pacific: Washington's intentional policy of strategic ambiguity. Now, this is an absolute masterclass in geopolitical balancing. The U.S. provides Taiwan with defensive weapons, sure, but they deliberately never explicitly promise that American troops will actually fight. Why do this? Because it keeps Beijing completely in the dark. They can never accurately calculate the final, true cost of an invasion. If Washington intervenes, you're looking at a catastrophic clash between the world's two biggest militaries. That lingering, massive uncertainty has successfully kept the peace for decades.
Which brings us to the sheer, calculated genius of Beijing's approach: the power of not moving first. By relying on this gradual, routine escalation rather than launching one massive strike, China cleverly avoids making that first, irreversible, catastrophic move. When you launch a beach invasion, there is absolutely no going back. It forces a black and white response from the entire world. But by using strategic conditioning, just pushing the line a few tiny inches at a time, they force everyone else to make the hard choices. They force the US and Taiwan into a state of paralysis, constantly debating, wait, is this specific cyber attack the final straw? Is this maritime inspection an act of war?
And that leaves us with the ultimate, profound question of our time. By pushing the limits just an inch at a time, making this military pressure entirely routine, how far can Beijing actually go before the international community finally decides enough is enough? History shows us over and over again that the world will easily accept gradual, normalized changes way more than sudden, violent ones. As long as the pressure just feels like the new normal, the exact location of the red line remains a total mystery. So what do you think? Will this delicate status quo hold forever? Or will this slow boil eventually spill over? Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning what you see in the headlines.